Rewire your mind and become limitless. Chapter 1. The Invisible Garden Growing Inside You. Let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this for a moment. What if the life you're living right now, the one where you feel stuck, where confidence feels like something other people were born with, where you keep promising yourself, tomorrow will be different, but tomorrow looks exactly like today? What if none of that is your fault? What if I told you that the reason you haven't become the person you know you could be has nothing to do with how smart you are, how hard you work, or how many opportunities you've been given? What if the real reason is something you've never even seen? Something buried so deep inside you that it's been running your entire life without you ever knowing it was there. Right now, as you're taking in these words, there is an invisible garden growing inside your mind. And in that garden, seeds were planted a long time ago. Seeds you didn't choose. Seeds you didn't even know were being planted. Some of those seeds grew into beautiful things. Your sense of humor, your ability to care for others, the little spark that lights up when you discover something new. But other seeds, the ones planted by painful moments, harsh words, and experiences that left scars, those grew into thorny vines that have been quietly wrapping themselves around every dream you've ever had. Here's what breaks my heart about this. Most people spend their entire lives fighting against those vines without ever realizing that the real battle isn't about cutting them back. It's about planting new seeds. It's about understanding that your mind is a living, breathing ecosystem, and you have the power to cultivate it into something extraordinary. But before we get to the planting, we need to talk about something that might be uncomfortable to hear. We need to talk about the fact that most of your life, the decisions you make, the way you react to stress, the way you talk to yourself when nobody's listening, most of that isn't actually being controlled by the you that you think you are. There's a deeper part of you running the show. Think of it like the roots of a massive old oak tree. You see the branches, the leaves, the way it sways in the wind. But the real power, the thing that determines whether that tree stands tall or falls over, is underground, invisible, holding everything in place. Your subconscious mind is those roots. It's processing an astonishing amount of information every single second, roughly 11 million bits, while the part of you that thinks, plans, and makes conscious decisions, that part handles about 40 out of 11 million. Let that sink in for a moment. This means that the vast majority of what you do, feel, and believe is being managed by a part of your mind that you can't directly see or control. It manages your breathing. It keeps your heart beating. It handles your reflexes. But it also does something far more significant than any of those things. It decides how you respond to life. When someone criticizes you, your subconscious has already chosen your emotional reaction before your conscious mind even registers what was said. When you see an opportunity, your subconscious has already decided whether you'll reach for it or shrink away. When you look in the mirror, your subconscious has already written the script about what you see. And here's where it gets really personal. Think about the last time you genuinely tried to change something about yourself. Maybe you wanted to start waking up at 5 in the morning. Maybe you promised yourself you'd finally start that project you've been dreaming about. Maybe you looked at yourself and said, "Enough. I'm going to be different starting now." And for a few days, maybe even a couple of weeks, you were. You felt alive. You felt like you'd finally cracked the code. And then, slowly, quietly, almost imperceptibly, you slid right back. Back to the old patterns, back to the snooze button, back to the couch, back to the same version of yourself you'd sworn you were done being. You probably told yourself it was because you're lazy, or undisciplined, or just not the kind of person who can sustain change. But I need you to hear me on this, because it matters more than you know. That wasn't you failing. That was your subconscious doing exactly what it was designed to do: protect the familiar. Your subconscious mind is like a garden that's been growing for decades. Every experience you've had was a seed. Every word spoken to you as a child was a seed. Every moment of rejection, every whisper of "you're not good enough," every time you watched someone you loved struggle, all of those became seeds that your subconscious faithfully planted, watered, and grew into the landscape of your inner world. And now that landscape is your default reality. It's the lens through which you see everything. It's the voice that whispers doubt when you're about to do something brave. It's the invisible hand that pulls you back to safe ground whenever you dare to reach for something higher. But, and this is the part I need you to hold on to like your life depends on it, gardens can be replanted. Soil can be renewed. Old growth can be cleared to make room for new life. The same earth that grew those thorny vines of self-doubt can grow wildflowers of confidence. The same ground that nurtured fear can nurture courage. The people who seem to move through life with this unshakable sense of purpose and confidence, the ones who make it look effortless, they aren't working with different soil than you. They just learned how to tend their garden differently. They learned that they don't have to accept whatever grew there by accident. They can choose what grows next. This is not about pretending the old growth doesn't exist. This is not about toxic positivity or pasting affirmations over deep wounds. This is about understanding at a fundamental level that the operating system running your life was installed without your consent, and you now have the ability to update it. Your mind is not a fixed thing. It is the most adaptable, flexible, changeable organ in your body. And the science backs this up completely. The same neural pathways that learned to doubt can learn to believe. The same brain that was wired for anxiety can be rewired for calm determination. The same inner landscape that grew limitation can grow limitless possibility. The question isn't whether this is possible. The question is whether you're willing to pick up the gardening tools and start. Chapter 2: The Quiet War You Didn't Know You Were Fighting. Now I want to talk about something that might explain a lot of the frustration you've been carrying. Because if you're anything like most people I've met, you've had this nagging feeling for a long time, this sense that something invisible is working against you. You know what you want. You know what you need to do. You might even know exactly how to do it. And yet, you don't. Or you start and stop. Or you get maddeningly close to a breakthrough, and then, somehow, everything falls apart. The relationship implodes. The business plan gets shelved. The creative project dies in a drawer. The gym membership goes unused. And the worst part? You can't even explain why. There's no logical reason. There's no big dramatic obstacle. There's just this invisible wall, this quiet resistance that you can feel but can't name. My friend, what you're experiencing has a name. It's called subconscious sabotage. And it is one of the most common, most misunderstood, and most heartbreaking patterns in human psychology. Here's what's happening beneath the surface. Your subconscious mind, that ancient, powerful part of you that manages 11 million bits per second, has one job that it considers more important than anything else. More important than your happiness. More important than your success. More important than your dreams. Its job is to keep you alive. And to your subconscious, alive means familiar. Familiar means safe. And safe means repeating the patterns that have kept you surviving up until this point. It doesn't matter that those patterns are making you miserable. It doesn't matter that you're capable of so much more. It doesn't matter that staying in your comfort zone is slowly crushing your soul. Your subconscious has decided that miserable but familiar is preferable to happy but unknown. And it will fight to keep you right where you are. Think of it like a river that's been flowing in the same direction for years. The water has carved deep channels into the earth. Even if you want the river to flow somewhere new, the water naturally follows the path of least resistance, the channels that are already there. Your habits, your automatic reactions, your default emotional responses, these are all channels that have been carved over decades of repetition. When you try to redirect the river, when you try to think differently, act differently, be differently, your subconscious interprets this as a threat. It doesn't see a new direction. It sees a flood. It sees destruction. It sees danger. And it responds the way it's designed to respond, by pulling you back to the familiar channel as quickly as possible. This is why self-sabotage often strikes hardest when you're closest to a breakthrough. Your subconscious can sense when real change is imminent. It can feel the river starting to shift, and that's when it deploys everything in its arsenal. Sudden anxiety, crippling self-doubt, convenient distractions, mysterious exhaustion, inexplicable arguments with the people you love, financial emergencies that seem to materialize from nowhere. And here's the truly cruel twist. If you're a thoughtful, intelligent person, which I suspect you are because you're here taking this seriously, your subconscious is even better at sabotaging you, because it uses your intelligence against you. It doesn't send you obvious fear or dramatic resistance. It sends you perfectly reasonable explanations for why you shouldn't move forward right now. I need to do a bit more research before I start. The timing isn't ideal. Maybe next quarter. I should save a bit more money first, just to be safe. Let me get this other thing sorted out. Then I'll focus on my dreams. These sound like wisdom. They feel like prudence. But they are elegant disguises for fear. They are your subconscious mind wearing a suit and speaking in a calm, rational voice, while it carefully guides you away from the very thing that could change your life. I want you to think about that for a moment. How many times have you talked yourself out of something important, using reasons that sounded perfectly logical? How many opportunities have you let pass because the timing wasn't quite right? How many dreams have you put on hold because you convinced yourself you needed just a little more preparation? That was the quiet war. And until now, you didn't even know you were fighting it. But awareness is the first weapon. Now that you can see the pattern, you can start to recognize it in real time. The next time you feel resistance rising up just as you're about to do something meaningful, the next time your mind floods you with perfectly rational reasons to wait, to hesitate, to play it safe, you'll know what's really happening. You'll recognize the saboteur for what it is, and that recognition alone begins to weaken its power. The people who become truly unstoppable aren't the ones who never face this inner resistance. They're the ones who learned to expect it, recognize it, and move through it anyway. They understand that resistance is not a stop sign, it's a mile marker. It means they're heading in the right direction. Chapter 3. How your mind paints the world you see. Now let's go deeper, because understanding why you get stuck is only part of the picture. The other part, the part that will truly change how you see everything, is understanding how your brain literally creates the reality you experience every single day. I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine two people walking into the same job interview. Same company, same position, same interviewer. One person walks in and notices the interviewer's serious expression, the stark lighting, the formal atmosphere. Their brain immediately interprets these signals as threatening. Their palms sweat. Their voice tightens. They leave feeling like they failed. The other person walks into the exact same room and notices the interviewer's focused attention, the professional environment, the opportunity to showcase their abilities. Their brain interprets these signals as exciting. Their energy rises. Their words flow. They leave feeling alive and engaged. Same room, same interviewer, same situation. Completely different realities. This isn't just a difference in attitude. This is a difference in neural programming. And it's happening to you every single moment of every single day, shaping your experience of the world in ways you've never consciously recognized. Your brain has a remarkable system called the reticular activating system. Think of it as a spotlight operator sitting in the control booth of your mind. At any given moment, your senses are being bombarded with millions of pieces of information. The sounds around you, the temperature of the air, the colors in your peripheral vision, the subtle expressions on people's faces. It's an overwhelming flood of data. Your conscious mind can only process a tiny fraction of all that information. So the spotlight operator has to make choices. It has to decide what to illuminate and what to leave in the dark. And here's the critical part. It makes those choices based on what it's been trained to consider important. If you've spent years believing that you're not good enough, your spotlight operator will scan every room for evidence that confirms this belief. It will highlight the one person who seems unimpressed while leaving the 10 people who are smiling in darkness. It will amplify every stumble you make while dimming every success. It will make rejection feel like a spotlight and achievement feel invisible. This isn't a flaw in your brain. It's actually an incredibly efficient system. Your brain is trying to be helpful by showing you information that matches your existing beliefs. The problem is that when your existing beliefs are rooted in limitation, this helpful filtering system becomes a prison that makes your limitations feel like absolute truth. Two people can live in the same city, work in the same field, and have access to the same opportunities. Yet one sees possibility everywhere, while the other sees nothing but dead ends. Neither is lying. Neither is delusional. They're both seeing what their brain's filtering system has been trained to show them. And here's what makes this even more powerful and more urgent for you to understand. Your brain doesn't distinguish between what's actually happening and what you're vividly imagining. When you lie awake at night, replaying that embarrassing moment from 3 years ago, your brain responds as if it's happening right now. The same stress hormones flood your system. The same neural pathways fire. The same emotional pain washes through you. Every time you worry about a worst-case scenario, you're essentially rehearsing failure. You're training your spotlight operator to look for problems. You're strengthening the very neural pathways that make those failures more likely to manifest. You're watering the weeds in your garden while wondering why the flowers won't grow. But, and I hope you're starting to feel the profound hope in this, the reverse is also true. When you vividly imagine yourself succeeding, your brain fires the same pathways as if you're actually succeeding. When you visualize yourself handling a challenge with grace, your neural networks begin to wire themselves for that graceful response. When you deliberately direct your attention toward possibilities and capabilities, your spotlight operator starts scanning for opportunities instead of threats. This is not wishful thinking. This is not just be positive and everything will work out. This is the fundamental science of how your brain constructs reality. And once you understand it, you hold in your hands the power to change what reality looks like. The most important thing I want you to take from this is that you are not seeing the world as it is. You are seeing the world as you've been programmed to see it. And programs can be changed. The spotlight can be redirected. The garden can be replanted. The river can be guided into new channels. Every thought you think today is either reinforcing the old reality or building a new one. Every image you hold in your mind is either strengthening the pathways of limitation or creating the pathways of possibility. There is no neutral. You are always programming yourself. The only question is whether you're doing it on purpose. And starting right now, you can choose to do it on purpose. You can choose to become the conscious gardener of your own mind, the deliberate operator of your own spotlight, the intentional architect of your own reality. The science gives you permission. The knowledge gives you power. All that's left is the decision to use them. Chapter 4. The Truth About Confidence Nobody Told You. I want to have an honest conversation with you about confidence, because I think you've been lied to about what it is, where it comes from, and why you feel like you don't have enough of it. And those lies have been costing you more than you realize. Somewhere along the way, you picked up this idea that confidence is something certain people just have, like it was handed out at birth and you were standing in the wrong line. You look at people who seem to walk through life with this easy self-assurance, the ones who speak up without hesitating, who take risks without spiraling into anxiety, who seem to trust themselves in ways that feel foreign to you, and you assume they're built from different material. They're not. I promise you, they're not. Confidence is not a trait. It's not a gift. It's not something woven into certain people's DNA while the rest of us got skipped. Confidence is a skill, and like every skill that has ever existed, from riding a bicycle to playing the piano to cooking a meal that actually tastes good, it can be learned, practiced, and developed by anyone willing to put in the reps. But here's where the lie gets really sneaky. Most people believe that confidence is something that shows up after success. They think the sequence goes like this. First, you achieve something impressive. Then, confidence arrives as a reward. So they wait. They wait to feel confident before they apply for the job. They wait to feel ready before they launch the project. They wait to feel worthy before they put themselves out there. And they wait, and they wait, and they keep waiting while their life quietly passes them by. The truth is that confidence works in exactly the opposite direction. Confidence doesn't come after you do the brave thing. Confidence is built because you did the brave thing. Every single person you admire for their confidence earned it the same way, by doing things before they felt ready, by speaking up before they felt certain, by stepping forward before they could see the whole path. Let me tell you something that might feel like cold water on your face, but I mean it with all the warmth in my heart. You will never feel ready. Not for the things that truly matter. The promotion, the conversation, the leap of faith, the vulnerable moment. Your brain will never give you a green light for any of those things. It will always find a reason to wait. Because as we talked about earlier, your subconscious interprets unfamiliar action as danger. And doing something brave is, by definition, unfamiliar. So if you're waiting to feel confident before you act, you're waiting for a train that doesn't run on that track. But here's what does work, and it's simpler than you might think. You act first. You take one small step despite the fear, despite the doubt, despite the voice in your head that says you're going to embarrass yourself. And then something remarkable happens. Your brain registers the experience. It notices that you survived. It records a tiny piece of evidence that says, we did something scary and we're still here. That tiny piece of evidence is the first brick in the foundation of real confidence. And then you do it again. Another small, brave act. Another brick. And again. And again. And slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the foundation grows. The evidence accumulates. Your brain begins to update its files. The old folder labeled "Things We Can't Handle" gets thinner. The new folder labeled "Things We Survived and maybe even enjoyed" gets thicker. This is what psychologists call experiential learning, and it is the only reliable path to genuine confidence. Not affirmations in the mirror, not motivational speeches, not pretending you're fearless when you're terrified. Just the simple, unglamorous practice of doing slightly brave things on a regular basis and letting your brain absorb the evidence. But I want to be careful here, because there's a trap that catches a lot of well-meaning people. They hear "do brave things," and they interpret that as "do terrifying things." They try to go from 0 to 100 overnight. They try to cure their fear of public speaking by booking a keynote address for 500 people. They try to overcome their social anxiety by forcing themselves into the most overwhelming situation they can find. And when it goes badly, which it often does because they've overwhelmed their nervous system, they interpret the experience as proof that they're just not confident people. They add another brick to the wrong foundation. The real secret is gentleness. Start with challenges that stretch you just a little bit beyond where you are right now. If speaking up in meetings terrifies you, start by sharing one thought in a small group. If approaching new people feels impossible, start by making eye contact and smiling at a stranger. If taking creative risks paralyzes you, start by sharing one idea with someone you trust. These tiny acts of courage might seem insignificant, but they are profound, because each one teaches your nervous system that growth doesn't equal death. Each one plants a seed in that inner garden that says, "I am someone who does brave things." And those seeds grow into something beautiful. Not the loud, chest-thumping confidence that you see performed on social media, but the quiet, steady, unshakable kind. The kind that doesn't need applause to sustain itself. The kind that remains even when things go wrong. The kind that whispers, "I can handle this," when life gets hard. There's another piece of this confidence puzzle that I think is incredibly important, and it's something most people overlook entirely. True confidence isn't just about bold action. It's about your relationship with failure. Because here's something that confident people understand that insecure people don't. Failure is not the opposite of confidence. Failure is the curriculum of confidence. Every setback, every rejection, every moment where things didn't go according to plan, these aren't evidence that you're not good enough. These are the reps. These are the training sessions that build the emotional resilience that makes confidence sustainable. When you learn to see failure as information rather than identity, as data about what to adjust rather than proof of who you are, something shifts at a deep level. The fear of failure loses its teeth. And when the fear of failure loses its teeth, you become someone who is willing to try. And someone who is willing to try again and again and again is someone who eventually succeeds. That is what real confidence looks like. Not the absence of fear, not the elimination of doubt, but the deep, earned, embodied knowledge that you can feel afraid and move forward anyway. That you can doubt yourself and still take the next step. That you can fall down and get back up. Not because you're superhuman, but because you've practiced getting back up enough times that it's become part of who you are. And that brings us to something even deeper than confidence. Something that makes confidence possible in the first place. Chapter 5. Becoming someone new without losing yourself. There's a force in your psychology that is more powerful than motivation, more powerful than discipline, and more powerful than any strategy or technique you could ever learn. It's the force of identity, the deep, often unconscious sense of who you believe you are. Your identity acts like a compass that's been calibrated to point in a specific direction. No matter what you try to do, no matter how hard you push, you will always tend to drift back toward the direction your compass is set. If your compass says, "I'm someone who struggles with money," you'll find yourself making financial decisions that keep you struggling, even when better options are sitting right in front of you. If your compass says, "I'm someone who doesn't deserve love," you'll unconsciously push away the very people who try to get close to you. This is why so many attempts at change feel like pushing a boulder uphill. You're trying to change your behavior while your identity, the compass, is still pointing in the old direction. And the moment you get tired, the moment you lose focus, the moment life throws something unexpected at you, that compass pulls you right back to where you started. I've seen this pattern break hearts. I've seen brilliant people with extraordinary potential stay stuck for years. Not because they lacked ability, but because their inner compass was calibrated to a version of themselves that couldn't hold the success they were reaching for. But here's the thing that fills me with so much hope for you. Your compass can be recalibrated. Your identity is not carved in stone. It's written in pencil. And you hold the eraser. The key is understanding that identity doesn't change through big declarations. You can't just announce to the universe, "I am now a confident, successful, unstoppable person," and expect your subconscious to update the files. Your subconscious doesn't respond to announcements. It responds to evidence. It responds to patterns. It responds to what you actually do consistently over time. Identity shifts happen through what I like to think of as voting. Every single day, through your actions, you are casting votes for the person you are becoming. When you wake up early and work on your project before the rest of the world is awake, that's a vote for, "I am someone who takes my dreams seriously." When you speak up in a meeting, even though your voice shakes, that's a vote for, "I am someone who shares their ideas despite fear." When you choose the salad instead of the drive-thru, that's a vote for, I am someone who respects my body. No single vote determines the election, but over time, the votes accumulate. The ballots pile up. And at some point, you look at the results and realize, with a kind of stunned wonder, that you've become someone new. Not because of one dramatic transformation, but because of 1,000 quiet choices that added up to a completely different person. The beauty of this approach is that it doesn't require you to be perfect. You don't need to cast the right vote every single time. You just need to cast more votes for who you're becoming than for who you used to be. Some days, old patterns will win. Some days, you'll slip back into familiar territory. That's not failure. That's just one vote. What matters is the trend. What matters is the direction. Start with actions so small that your subconscious barely notices them. If you want to become someone who reads, read 1 page tonight. If you want to become someone who exercises, do 5 push-ups tomorrow morning. If you want to become someone who takes creative risks, write 1 paragraph of that thing you've been dreaming about. These micro-actions feel almost laughably small. But that's exactly why they work. They slip beneath the radar of your subconscious resistance. They don't trigger the alarm bells. They don't activate the sabotage. They just quietly, gently, persistently begin to shift the compass. And as the compass shifts, something magical happens. Your self-talk changes. Instead of, "I'm trying to be healthier," you start saying, "I'm someone who takes care of myself." Instead of, "I want to be more disciplined," you start saying, "I'm someone who follows through." The language shifts from aspiration to identity, from wanting to being. And when being shifts, everything shifts with it. I also want to gently acknowledge something that doesn't get talked about enough. Letting go of your old identity, even when that identity was limiting you, involves a kind of grief. You've been living inside that version of yourself for a long time. It's familiar. It's comfortable. It has its own strange safety. Saying goodbye to who you've been, even when who you've been was holding you back, can feel like losing something. That's okay. Feel the grief. Honor it. But don't let it stop you. Because on the other side of that goodbye is a version of you that you haven't even met yet. A version that will look back on this moment as the turning point where everything began to change. The people who build truly extraordinary lives aren't the ones who were born extraordinary. They're the ones who decided, one small vote at a time, to become extraordinary. They understood that identity isn't something you discover. It's something you build, brick by brick, vote by vote, day by day. And that building process is available to you right now. Not tomorrow, not when conditions are perfect, not when you finally feel ready. Right now, in this moment, you can cast the first vote for the person you're becoming. Chapter 6. The 5-second bridge between who you are and who you could be. There is a tiny window of time, so small you could miss it in a heartbeat, that determines more about your future than almost anything else. It happens dozens of times a day, and most people don't even know it exists. It's the gap between impulse and action. The space between the moment your heart says go and the moment your brain says wait. The bridge between who you are right now and who you could become. That gap is roughly 5 seconds long, and in those 5 seconds, entire futures are created or destroyed. Here's what happens in that gap. You're sitting in a meeting and an idea flashes through your mind. A good idea, maybe even a brilliant one. For about 5 seconds, you feel the impulse to raise your hand and share it. But then your subconscious programming kicks in. The doubt arrives. The internal dialogue starts. What if they think it's stupid? What if I stumble over my words? What if someone already thought of that? And within 5 seconds, the impulse dies. Your hand stays down. The idea stays locked inside you, and the world never gets to hear it. Or you're lying in bed and the alarm goes off. For about 5 seconds, you feel the impulse to get up and start your day with intention. But then, the warmth of the blankets whispers to you. The pillow cups your head like an old friend, and within 5 seconds, your hand has found the snooze button, and the day you promised yourself, the one where you finally start, has already been surrendered. Or you see someone across the room, someone interesting, someone you'd love to talk to. For about 5 seconds, your heart leans forward. But then the familiar script plays. They probably don't want to be bothered. I wouldn't know what to say. It would be awkward. And within 5 seconds, the moment is gone. They walk away. You'll never know what could have happened. 5 seconds. That's all it takes for your old programming to override your new intentions. That's all it takes for comfort to defeat courage. That's all it takes for the person you've been to win another small victory over the person you're trying to become. But here's what changes everything. You can hijack those 5 seconds. The moment you feel an impulse toward growth, the moment your heart says go, you can count backwards. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And on 1, you move. You raise your hand. You throw off the blankets. You walk across the room. You take physical action before your subconscious has time to deploy its resistance. This works because of something beautiful about how your brain is wired. Hesitation isn't a thought. It's a neurological event. When you feel the pull towards something unfamiliar, your brain begins activating the same stress pathways it would activate if you were facing actual physical danger. Stress hormones start flowing. Your heart rate nudges upward. Your mind begins manufacturing reasons to stay safe. But, and this is the key, that full stress response takes a few seconds to fully engage. If you move your body before it completes, you interrupt the pattern. You cross the bridge before your brain can blow it up. You act from impulse before programming can overpower it. The backwards counting is crucial because it hijacks your prefrontal cortex, the executive, decision-making part of your brain. When you count, you shift from the emotional, fear-based processing of your limbic system to the rational, deliberate processing of your higher brain. It's like flipping a switch from react to choose. And in that moment of choice, you have just enough power to move. I know this sounds almost too simple. Count to 5 and move? That's the technique that's going to change my life? But I want you to think about something. The Grand Canyon was carved by water. Not by a single dramatic flood, but by the persistent, patient, seemingly insignificant flow of a river over millions of years. Small forces, applied consistently, create extraordinary transformations. Every time you use this 5-second bridge, you're sending a tiny trickle of water across a new landscape. You're carving a new channel in your neural terrain. You're teaching your brain that impulse toward growth can lead to action, not just anxiety. You're building a new pathway, one that, with enough repetition, becomes as deep and natural as the old pathways of hesitation and avoidance. Start small. Use the 5-second bridge to speak up once in a conversation. Use it to send one email you've been avoiding. Use it to start one task you've been procrastinating on for just 5 minutes. These aren't dramatic actions, but they're transformative ones, because each one proves to your brain that action is survivable, that courage doesn't lead to catastrophe, that the bridge holds your weight. And over time, not years, but weeks and months, something shifts. The bridge gets stronger. The pathway gets deeper. The gap between impulse and action gets shorter, until one day you realize that you're not counting anymore. You're just moving. The bridge has become so well-traveled that crossing it feels natural. This is what it looks like to override your default programming in real time. Not through meditation retreats or expensive seminars or years of therapy, though those things have their place, but through the simple, radical, daily practice of counting 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and moving before your old self can talk your new self out of it. Your impulses toward growth are not random. They're messages from the person you're becoming, reaching back through time to guide the person you are right now. Every time you honor those impulses with action, you're saying yes to your future self. Every time you let them die in the 5-second gap, you're saying, not yet. The choice presents itself dozens of times a day, and it's always the same choice. Comfort or courage, familiar or growth, the person you've been or the person you could be. 5 seconds. That's all that stands between you and the next version of yourself. And now you know how to cross. Chapter 7. Rewriting the code while the system is still running. Now that you understand the invisible forces shaping your life, the garden, the river, the spotlight, the compass, the 5-second bridge, it's time to talk about the actual process of rewriting your mental programming. Because understanding is essential, but understanding alone never changed anyone's life. Application does. Here's something I want you to sit with for a moment. The mental software you're currently running was installed when you were a child. Think about that. The programs that are making your decisions today, shaping your emotional reactions today, determining what you believe is possible for you today, most of those were written by a version of you that still believed in the tooth fairy. You were 5 years old when your father's offhand comment about money being scarce planted a seed of financial anxiety that still blooms in your chest every time you check your bank account. You were 8 when a teacher's impatient sigh taught your nervous system that asking questions meant risking humiliation. You were 12 when the cool kids at lunch made you feel invisible, and your subconscious quietly wrote a rule that said belonging requires being someone other than who you actually are. These experiences weren't catastrophic. They weren't dramatic. But they were formative. And the programs they installed have been running in the background ever since, making decisions on your behalf without ever asking for your permission. Now imagine you were still using a computer that ran on software from the early 2000s. Imagine trying to navigate today's world with a system that was designed for a completely different era. It would be slow, glitchy, incompatible with almost everything you need it to do. You'd be frustrated constantly, and you'd probably blame the computer rather than recognizing that the software simply needs updating. That's what's happening inside you. You're trying to navigate an adult world with childhood software. And every time you feel stuck, every time you self-sabotage, every time you react in ways that don't serve you, that's not a flaw in your character. That's outdated software producing predictable errors. The good news, the really profoundly good news, is that your brain updates differently than a computer. You don't need to shut everything down, wipe the hard drive, and start from scratch. You can rewrite the code while the system is still running. You can install new programs alongside the old ones and gradually shift which programs are dominant. But you need to speak your subconscious mind's language. And here's what most people get wrong. Your subconscious doesn't speak the language of logic. You can't reason with it. You can't present it with a well-constructed argument about why your limiting beliefs are irrational and expect it to say, "Oh, you're right, I'll stop now." That's like trying to communicate with someone who only speaks Mandarin by speaking louder in English. It doesn't matter how good your argument is if you're using the wrong language. Your subconscious speaks 3 languages: repetition, emotion, and imagery. These are the only channels through which new programming can be installed, and when you use all 3 together, the results can be extraordinary. Let's start with imagery, because this is where the magic truly lives. Your brain, as we discussed earlier, cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. The same neural pathways fire. The same chemical responses occur. The same learning happens. This means that you can literally practice being the person you want to become inside the theater of your own mind. But I'm not talking about vague, fuzzy daydreaming where you imagine yourself being successful in some abstract, undefined way. That's like trying to give someone directions by saying, "Just go somewhere nice." Your subconscious needs specificity. Close your eyes and see yourself walking into a specific room. Feel the temperature of the air on your skin. Hear the ambient sounds, the murmur of conversation, the hum of air conditioning, the click of your shoes on the floor. See yourself standing tall, shoulders relaxed, breathing steady. Watch yourself handling a specific challenge with grace. Hear your own voice, calm, clear, assured. Feel the emotion in your chest, not anxiety, but quiet readiness. Live the experience in full sensory detail, as if you're already there. When you do this, really do this with focus and emotion and vivid detail, your brain begins building the neural infrastructure for that experience. It starts laying down the pathways that will support that behavior when the real moment arrives. You're essentially giving your subconscious a rehearsal before the performance, and your subconscious treats that rehearsal as real practice. This is not wishful thinking. This is the exact technique that Olympic athletes, elite surgeons, and world-class musicians use to perform at their peak. They don't just physically practice. They mentally rehearse with such intensity that their brains can barely tell the difference between imagined performance and actual performance. Now layer in repetition. Your subconscious didn't learn your current limitations from a single experience. It learned them through repeated exposure over years. The criticism you received wasn't a one-time event. It was a pattern that reinforced itself hundreds of times. Your self-doubt didn't arrive in a single moment. It was built brick by brick through countless small experiences that all told the same story. Rewriting these patterns requires the same mechanism: repetition, daily visualization, daily practice, daily reinforcement of the new programming you're installing. Not once a week when you remember, not when you're feeling inspired. Every single day, even when it feels pointless, even when nothing seems to be changing, even when the old patterns are screaming louder than the new ones. There is a period in this process, and I want to be really honest with you about this, where nothing seems to be working. You've been visualizing for weeks. You've been practicing new behaviors. You've been doing everything right. And yet your old patterns are still showing up. Your old emotions are still triggering. Your old self is still very much present. This is the point where most people quit. They decide it doesn't work. They go back to their old ways. They tell themselves they tried. But here's what they didn't see. Beneath the surface, the new neural pathways were growing. Like seeds planted in dark soil, the changes were happening underground, invisible, silent, but real. Neuroplasticity is a gradual process. You don't see the roots forming. You don't see the soil shifting. You just see the surface, unchanged, and you lose faith. Don't lose faith. Not here. Not when you're this close. Because one morning, and it often happens suddenly, you'll realize that you responded to a situation differently than you used to. Not because you forced yourself to, not because you remembered a technique, but because your default reaction has actually changed. The new programming has taken hold. The new pathways have become stronger than the old ones. And in that moment, you'll understand that every invisible day of practice was building toward this visible transformation. The final language of your subconscious is emotion. Thoughts without emotional charge pass through your subconscious like water through a sieve. But thoughts wrapped in genuine feeling embed themselves deep in your neural architecture. This is why your most painful memories are also your most vivid. They were encoded with intense emotion. When you visualize your new self, don't just see the image. Feel the pride. Feel the relief. Feel the joy of finally becoming who you were meant to be. Let the emotion wash through your body until your eyes sting and your chest swells. That emotion is the signature your subconscious needs to accept the new program as authentic. There's a window of time each day when this process is most effective, and I want you to know about it because it can accelerate everything. Right before you fall asleep and right after you wake up, your brain passes through a state called theta, a drowsy, liminal space where your conscious mind is quiet and your subconscious is wide open. These are the moments when new programming installs most easily. Use them. Visualize your new self as you drift off to sleep. Repeat your new beliefs as you emerge into wakefulness. Plant your seeds in the most fertile soil your mind has to offer. Chapter 8. Making Friends with the Monster Under Your Bed. Can we talk about fear for a moment? Not the motivational poster version of fear, where someone tells you to feel the fear and do it anyway. As if that's easy. As if fear is just a minor inconvenience you can brush aside with the right attitude. I mean real fear. The kind that tightens your throat and empties your stomach. The kind that wakes you up at 3 a.m. with scenarios your conscious mind would never entertain in daylight. The kind that has stopped you, really, truly stopped you, from doing things you know would change your life. I want to talk about that fear. And I want to talk about it with tenderness. Because I think fear is one of the most misunderstood experiences in human life. Most people treat fear as an enemy, something to be conquered, something to be eliminated, something that stands between them and the life they want. And when they can't eliminate it, which they can't because fear is a fundamental part of being human, they interpret their inability as weakness. They think brave people don't feel fear. They think successful people have somehow gotten past it. They think there's a magic threshold you cross where fear stops showing up. None of that is true, not even a little bit. The most courageous people you've ever admired, the entrepreneurs who built empires, the artists who bared their souls, the leaders who stood up when everyone else sat down. Every single one of them was afraid, deeply, viscerally afraid. The difference isn't that they didn't feel fear. The difference is that they changed their relationship with it. Think of fear like a smoke alarm. When your smoke alarm goes off, it doesn't necessarily mean your house is on fire. Sometimes it means you burned the toast. Sometimes it's a low battery triggering a false alarm. Sometimes it's just steam from the shower. The alarm itself is neutral. It's simply a detection system alerting you to pay attention. Your fear response works the same way. When your body floods with adrenaline, when your heart hammers, when your palms sweat and your mind races, those sensations aren't telling you that disaster is imminent. They're telling you that something significant is happening. Something that your subconscious has flagged as important. And important doesn't mean dangerous. Often, it means meaningful. Here's something fascinating about your neurochemistry. The physical sensations of fear and the physical sensations of excitement are virtually identical. Same racing heart, same surge of adrenaline, same heightened awareness, same tingling in your extremities. The only difference is the label your brain applies to those sensations. When your brain labels them as fear, you freeze. When your brain labels them as excitement, you mobilize. Same sensations, completely different outcomes. And here's the remarkable part. You can consciously choose which label to apply. This is called anxiety reappraisal, and it's one of the most powerful psychological techniques ever studied. When you feel that surge of adrenaline before doing something that scares you, giving a presentation, having a difficult conversation, launching something new, instead of saying, "I'm so nervous," you say, "I'm so excited." Instead of trying to calm the energy down, you redirect it upward. This isn't denial. This isn't pretending you're not afraid. This is recognizing that the energy coursing through your body is fuel, and you get to choose where to direct it. You can let it drive you into a corner, or you can let it drive you forward. The fuel is the same. The direction is your choice. But reappraisal is just the front door of fear immunity. The deeper work involves gradually, patiently, compassionately expanding the territory where you feel safe to operate. Think of your comfort zone as a clearing in a dense forest. Inside the clearing, everything is familiar. The trees, the sounds, the paths, you know them all. Beyond the clearing, the forest is dark and unknown. Your subconscious has drawn a boundary around the clearing and posted a very clear sign. Beyond this point, there be dragons. Most people spend their entire lives inside the clearing. They peer into the forest occasionally, feel the prickle of fear, and retreat to the center of what they know. They never discover that the forest isn't full of dragons. It's full of new clearings, wider and more beautiful than the one they've been standing in. Expanding your clearing doesn't mean charging blindly into the densest part of the forest. It means taking one step past the boundary, looking around, breathing, realizing you're still alive, then taking another step tomorrow, and another the day after that. Each step expands the clearing just a little bit more. Each step teaches your nervous system that the forest is not as dangerous as it believed. Each step makes the next step easier. Over weeks and months of this gentle, persistent exploration, something wonderful happens. The clearing has grown so much larger that things that once terrified you now feel completely ordinary. Speaking up in groups. Just another part of the clearing. Putting your work into the world. Just another familiar path. Taking financial risks. Just another direction you know you can walk. The things you're most afraid of right now. I want you to hold this close. Those are almost certainly the things that will matter most to your growth. Fear is not a wall built to stop you. Fear is a signpost pointing toward everything you most need to experience. The greater the fear, the greater the potential for transformation on the other side. Your dreams aren't hiding inside your comfort zone. They never were. They're standing just beyond the tree line, waiting for you to be brave enough to step into the forest. And every step you take proves that you already are. Chapter 9. The Shelter That No Storm Can Touch. Life is going to hit you. Not might, will. There will be days that knock the wind out of you. There will be seasons that feel like they'll never end. There will be moments when you look around and wonder how everything fell apart so quickly, so thoroughly, so unfairly. I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying this because I care about you too much to pretend otherwise. And because what I'm about to share with you is, in many ways, the most important thing we've discussed so far. You can have all the confidence in the world. You can reprogram your subconscious with the most empowering beliefs imaginable. You can master the 5-second bridge and build momentum and shift your identity. But if you don't develop the ability to remain standing when life tries to knock you down, none of those things will sustain you when the real storms arrive. What I'm talking about is resilience, but not the hollow Instagram version of resilience that says good vibes only and everything happens for a reason. I'm talking about the deep, bone-level kind of resilience that allows you to feel the full weight of a difficult experience, the grief, the anger, the confusion, the despair, and still find your way back to yourself. Resilient people are not people who don't suffer. Please hear that. They're not people who have some supernatural immunity to pain. They feel everything. The loss, the disappointment, the betrayal, the failure. They feel all of it just as deeply as anyone else. The difference is in what happens next. The difference is in recovery time. Think of it like two trees in a storm. Both trees get battered by the same wind. Both bend. Both lose branches. But one tree has deep, widespread roots that hold firm in the soil. After the storm passes, it straightens, puts out new growth, and stands taller than before. The other tree has shallow roots. It bends just as far, but it doesn't have the underground support to recover. It stays bent, or it falls entirely. Your psychological resilience is your root system, and just like the roots of a tree, it can be deliberately grown deeper and wider. The foundation of resilience is understanding. Really, truly understanding at a gut level the difference between what you can control and what you can't. Most of the suffering I see in people's lives doesn't come from the difficult events themselves. It comes from exhausting themselves trying to control things that are completely beyond their influence. You can't control what other people think of you. You can't control whether the economy cooperates with your plans. You can't control whether that person calls you back. You can't control the past. You can't control the weather, the news cycle, the traffic, or the thousands of other forces that shape your daily experience. What you can control, and this is where your true power lives, is how you respond. You can control the thoughts you choose to nurture. You can control the actions you take in the face of adversity. You can control the meaning you assign to your experiences. You can control whether you show up tomorrow and try again. This isn't a small distinction. This is the distinction. This is the line that separates people who are tossed around by every wave from people who learn to navigate even the roughest seas. When you stop wasting energy on things you can't control and redirect that energy toward things you can, something extraordinary happens. You feel a kind of power returning to you, not the power to control the world, but the power to control yourself within the world. And that, it turns out, is the only power you ever really needed. Resilience also requires developing a healthy relationship with difficult emotions. Most people have one of two default responses to pain. They either suppress it or they drown in it. Suppressors push down their feelings, paste on a brave face, and pretend everything is fine until the pressure builds so high that it explodes in ways they never intended. Drowners get pulled under by their emotions, losing perspective, losing agency, losing themselves in the intensity of what they're feeling. The resilient path runs between these two extremes. It says, feel everything, deny nothing. But don't let the feeling become the whole story. You can be devastated by a loss and still believe in your future. You can be crushed by a failure and still know that you're capable of success. You can be heartbroken and still keep your heart open. This requires what psychologists call metacognition, the ability to step back from your experience and observe it with a measure of distance. Not cold, clinical distance, compassionate distance. The kind that says, I see that I'm hurting right now. I see that this is hard. And I also see that this is not the end of my story. One of the most powerful resilience practices is what I think of as storm journaling. When you're in the middle of a difficult period, write down 3 things: what happened, what you're feeling about it, and what you can control about it. This simple practice externalizes the chaos in your mind and gives it structure. It separates the facts from the feelings. And most importantly, it redirects your attention toward agency, toward the things you can actually do even in the middle of the storm. There's one more thing I want to say about resilience, and I think it might be the most important thing of all. Resilience is not a solo sport. The strongest, most resilient people I've ever known are not the ones who handle everything alone. They're the ones who have learned to reach out, to ask for help, to let other people hold some of the weight when it gets too heavy to carry alone. There's a myth in our culture, especially if you're someone who prides yourself on strength and independence, that needing support is a sign of weakness. It's not. It's a sign of wisdom. Trees with interconnected root systems survive storms that topple isolated trees. The same is true for people. Build your shelter, grow your roots, but don't grow them alone. Grow them alongside others, intertwined, supporting each other. Because the storms will come, and when they do, You want to be the kind of person with the kind of foundation that doesn't just survive them, but grows stronger because of them. Chapter 10. The Quiet Superpower of a Still Mind. I want to tell you something that might sound counterintuitive in a world that worships speed, hustle, and constant activity. The most powerful thing you can do for your future isn't working harder. It isn't learning more. It isn't optimizing your schedule or downloading another productivity app. It's learning to be still. Not forever, not as an escape, but deliberately, strategically, powerfully still in a world that has made stillness feel almost impossible. Because here's what's happening to your mind right now, whether you realize it or not. You are living in the most attention-hostile environment in human history. Every app on your phone was designed by teams of brilliant engineers whose entire job was to make you look at their screen instead of living your life. Every notification, every infinite scroll, every autoplay video, every red badge on an icon, these aren't accidents. They're weapons, precision engineered. Weapons aimed directly at your ability to think deeply, work meaningfully, and be fully present in your own life. And they're winning. Not because you're weak, not because you lack discipline, but because you've been outgunned. You brought a human brain, a beautiful, powerful, but vulnerable human brain, to a war being fought by algorithms with unlimited resources and zero concern for your well-being. The result? Most people have quietly, almost imperceptibly, lost the ability to focus. They can't read a chapter of a book without reaching for their phone. They can't have a conversation without glancing at a screen. They can't sit alone with their thoughts for 5 minutes without feeling a crawling restlessness that drives them back to the scroll, the feed, the endless stream of someone else's content. And here's the part that should alarm you. This isn't just about productivity. This is about the quality of your inner life. When you lose the ability to focus, you lose ability to think deeply about who you are and who you want to become. You lose the ability to process your emotions instead of numbing them with distraction. You lose the ability to hear the quiet voice inside you, the one that knows what you really want, what you really need, what really matters. Because that voice can only be heard in silence, and silence has become the rarest commodity in modern life. But I have good news. Your attention is not permanently broken. It's a muscle that's been neglected, not a limb that's been lost. And like any muscle, it can be rebuilt through patient, consistent exercise. The rebuilding starts small, smaller than you'd think. I'm not going to ask you to meditate for an hour, or go on a silent retreat, or throw your phone into the ocean, though that last one does sound tempting sometimes. I'm going to ask you to practice what I call focused presence. 5 minutes of doing one thing, and only one thing, with your complete attention. It might be drinking your morning tea and actually tasting it. Not drinking tea while scrolling, not drinking tea while planning your day, not drinking tea while half listening to a podcast. Just drinking tea, feeling the warmth of the cup in your hands, noticing the steam rising, tasting the subtle flavors, being for 5 minutes completely where you are. It sounds almost ridiculously simple, but try it, and you'll discover something humbling. Your mind will rebel. Within 30 seconds, it will try to pull you somewhere else, to a worry, a plan, a memory, a craving for stimulation. You'll catch yourself reaching for your phone without even deciding to do it, as if your hand has a mind of its own. This is not failure. This is the moment of training. Every time you notice your attention has wandered, and gently bring it back. Gently, without judgment, without frustration. You are doing a rep. You are strengthening the neural pathways of sustained attention. You are teaching your brain that it can stay in one place without the world ending. As 5 minutes becomes comfortable, extend to 10, then 15, then 20. You're not trying to reach some magical number. You're building capacity. You're reclaiming territory that was stolen from you by an attention economy that profits from your distraction. And as that capacity grows, something remarkable begins to happen in other areas of your life. Your work gets deeper. Your conversations get richer. Your creative ideas get more nuanced. Your emotional processing gets more complete. You start to notice things you've been missing. Beauty in ordinary moments. Insights hiding in plain sight. Connections between ideas that only reveal themselves to a mind that's willing to be still long enough to see them. There's a state that researchers call flow, that rare and precious experience of being so completely absorbed in what you're doing that time dissolves, self-consciousness vanishes, and you perform at levels that surprise even yourself. Flow is where your best work lives. It's where your deepest creativity resides. It's where the quality of your output goes from competent to extraordinary. Flow isn't mystical, it's neurological, and its prerequisite is sustained, undistracted focus. You cannot enter flow while checking your email. You cannot enter flow while toggling between tasks. You cannot enter flow with half your attention on your phone and half on your work. Flow requires what I call a sanctuary of attention, a protected space of time where nothing and no one can interrupt your immersion. Creating that sanctuary is one of the most valuable things you can do for your career, your creativity, and your sense of fulfillment. Guard your attention like you'd guard something precious, because it is precious. In a world where everyone is distracted, the ability to focus deeply is not just an advantage, it's a superpower. And it's a superpower that's available to anyone willing to train for it, one quiet, patient, present moment at a time. Chapter 11. The Snowball That Becomes an Avalanche. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine you're standing at the top of a snow-covered mountain. In your hands, you're holding a snowball. It's small, so small it barely fills your palm. If you showed it to someone and said, "This snowball is going to become an avalanche," they'd probably laugh. But you know something they don't. You know that if you start rolling that snowball downhill, it picks up more snow as it goes. And the more snow it picks up, the bigger it gets. And the bigger it gets, the more snow it picks up. And at some point, a point that arrives much sooner than anyone expects, that tiny snowball has become a force so massive that nothing can stop it. That's momentum, and it is the most underestimated, most misunderstood, and most transformative force in human psychology. Most people never build real momentum because they're waiting for the avalanche before they start rolling the snowball. They want to feel motivated before they take action. They want conditions to be perfect before they begin. They want to see the whole staircase before they take the first step. And so they stand at the top of the mountain, snowball in hand, waiting for a feeling that will never come until they start moving. Here's the truth that changes everything. Motivation doesn't create action. Action creates motivation. Energy doesn't come before effort. Effort generates energy. Clarity doesn't precede movement. Movement creates clarity. Everything you've been waiting for is on the other side of starting. But starting feels so hard. I know it does. When you're in what I call full stop mode, when you haven't been taking action, when the gap between where you are and where you want to be feels enormous, when every task on your list feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds, starting feels almost physically impossible. Your brain is generating resistance at maximum volume. Every excuse sounds reasonable. Every reason to wait sounds wise. This is where the concept of activation energy becomes your best friend. In chemistry, activation energy is the minimum amount of energy required to start a reaction. Once the reaction begins, it sustains itself. But you need that initial spark to get things going. Your psychological activation energy is almost always smaller than you think. You don't need to write a chapter. You need to write a sentence. You don't need to complete a workout. You need to lace up your shoes. You don't need to overhaul your entire morning routine. You need to set one alarm and honor it once. These micro-commitments work because they outsmart your resistance. Your subconscious mind will throw everything it has at the idea of writing a book. But it barely notices writing one sentence. The task is so small, so unthreatening, so laughably easy that it slips past the guards. And once you've written that one sentence, something magical happens. The next sentence comes a little easier, and the next one easier still. The snowball has started rolling. But building momentum isn't just about starting. It's about what happens after you start. It's about the daily practice of showing up, even when the snowball still feels pathetically small. Even when progress seems invisible, even when the voice in your head says, "This isn't working." Your brain needs evidence of progress to stay engaged. Without that evidence, even the most determined person will eventually lose steam. This is why tracking your efforts, not your outcomes, but your efforts, is so important. Keep a record of the days you showed up. Mark a calendar. Fill in a simple chart. Create some visible, tangible representation of the fact that you are doing what you said you would do. Focus on what you can control, the actions, the reps, the showing up. Not the results. Those will come, but they come on their own timeline, and tying your motivation to outcomes you can't fully control is a recipe for discouragement. When you measure inputs, days exercised, pages written, calls made, minutes practiced, you can feel successful every single day. Because success in this framework is defined by action taken, not results achieved. There's another ingredient in the momentum recipe that most people neglect entirely, and it costs them dearly. That ingredient is celebration. Not grand, elaborate celebration, just the simple, quiet practice of acknowledging to yourself, I did what I said I would do today. That matters. Most of us are brutally efficient at noticing what we haven't done. We carry mental lists of our shortcomings, our missed targets, our unfulfilled promises. But we're terrible at pausing to recognize what we have done. And this imbalance is toxic to momentum because your brain needs positive reinforcement to keep going. It needs to know that the effort is being noticed, even if the only one noticing is you. So tonight, before you go to sleep, tell yourself, one thing you did today that you're proud of. It doesn't have to be impressive by anyone else's standards. It just has to be true. I showed up. I did the hard thing. I kept my promise to myself. That small acknowledgement is another handful of snow added to the snowball, and over time those handfuls accumulate into something no one can ignore. The compound effect of momentum is staggering. Small actions performed daily create results over months that would seem impossible if you tried to achieve them all at once. The person who writes 200 words a day has a novel in a year. The person who saves a small amount each week has a financial cushion in months. The person who practices one brave act daily has unrecognizable confidence by the end of a quarter. But here's the other side of the coin, and I share it with you not to scare you, but because you deserve the full truth. Momentum works in both directions. Every day you don't take action, you're building momentum in the wrong direction. You're strengthening the neural pathways of avoidance. You're deepening the channels of procrastination. You're casting votes for the version of yourself that stays stuck. There is no neutral. You are always building momentum. The only question is which direction the snowball is rolling. And the answer to that question is determined by what you do today. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. Chapter 12. Conducting Your Own Orchestra. Let me share something with you that took me a long time to understand, and I wish someone had explained it to me much earlier, because it would have saved me countless days of frustration, self-blame, and feeling like something was fundamentally wrong with me. Here it is. You are not one thing. You are not a single instrument playing a single note. You are an entire orchestra. And the quality of your life, the quality of your work, your relationships, your health, your creative output, your inner peace, depends not on how loudly any single instrument plays, but on how well the whole orchestra plays together. Most people never learn to conduct their own orchestra. They let whichever instrument happens to be loudest at the moment take control of the entire performance. When anxiety is loud, anxiety runs the show. When fatigue is loud, fatigue calls the shots. When distraction is loud, distraction becomes the conductor. The result is a chaotic, dissonant performance that exhausts the musician and disappoints the audience. Elite performers, the people who seem to operate at levels that others find almost incomprehensible, have learned something different. They've learned to conduct. They've learned to bring the right instruments forward at the right time and quiet the ones that aren't needed. They've learned to create harmony out of the same raw materials that everyone else has. This starts with understanding that your brain doesn't operate at the same level throughout the day. You have natural rhythms, peaks and valleys of mental energy, creativity, and executive function that cycle in roughly predictable patterns. Most people are completely ignorant of their own rhythms. They schedule their most demanding work during their lowest energy periods, then wonder why they can't concentrate. They try to be creative when their brain is in analytical mode, then conclude that they're just not creative people. The first step in conducting your orchestra is mapping your rhythms. For the next 2 weeks, pay attention to when you feel sharp, when you feel foggy, when ideas flow easily, and when your brain feels like it's wading through wet concrete. You'll start to notice patterns. Most people discover they have 2 or 3 windows of peak mental energy each day, periods of 60 to 90 minutes where their brain is operating at its best. These windows are your most valuable resource. More valuable than money, more valuable than time. Because what you produce during peak mental energy is qualitatively different from what you produce during low energy. Protect these windows like the treasures they are. Schedule your most important, most challenging, most meaningful work during these periods. Save emails, administrative tasks, and routine activities for your valleys. But conducting your orchestra goes beyond energy management. It also means learning to shift your mental state deliberately. There are moments when you need to be calm and analytical. There are moments when you need to be energized and bold. There are moments when you need to be open and creative. And there are moments when you need to be precise and detail-oriented. Most people are at the mercy of whatever state they happen to wake up in. If they wake up anxious, they're anxious all day. If they wake up lethargic, they're lethargic all day. They don't realize that mental states are not weather systems that happen to you. They're instruments that you can learn to play. Your body is the fastest instrument for changing your mental state. If you need energy and alertness, physical movement, even 2 minutes of jumping jacks or a brisk walk around the block sends a cascade of neurochemical signals that shift your brain into a higher gear. If you need calm focus, slow, deep breathing, 4 counts in, 7 counts hold, 8 counts out, activates your parasympathetic nervous system and creates a state of relaxed concentration. If you need confidence before a high-stakes moment, standing tall with your shoulders back and chest open for just 2 minutes measurably changes your hormonal balance. These aren't tricks. These are the direct communication channels between your body and your brain. When you learn to use them deliberately, you gain the ability to create the mental state you need when you need it, regardless of how you happened to feel when you woke up. There's another piece of the elite performance puzzle that I think is critically important, and it's the one that high achievers are most likely to ignore: recovery. Your orchestra can't play fortissimo all day long. The instruments need rest. The musicians need silence. The conductor needs to step off the podium and just breathe. Most people who are ambitious and driven have a complicated relationship with rest. It feels lazy. It feels unproductive. It feels like time wasted when there's still so much to do. But here's what neuroscience tells us with absolute clarity. Rest is not the opposite of performance. Rest is what makes performance possible. Your brain consolidates learning during rest. It forms new neural connections during sleep. It generates creative insights during periods of mind wandering. It recovers cognitive capacity during breaks. Without adequate rest, your performance doesn't just plateau, it degrades. You become less creative, less focused, less emotionally regulated, and more prone to the very mistakes and poor decisions that create the problems you're working so hard to solve. The most productive people in the world aren't the ones who work the most hours. They're the ones who work the right hours at the right intensity and then recover completely so they can do it again tomorrow. They understand that sustainable excellence requires rhythm, intense effort followed by genuine rest, followed by intense effort again. Think of it like the ocean. The waves don't just push forward endlessly. They surge and they recede. They crash and they pull back. And it's that rhythm, the constant alternation between force and retreat, that gives the ocean its power. If the water only pushed forward, it would exhaust itself in minutes. The retreat is what allows the next wave to be just as powerful as the last. Your life works the same way. Your work sessions are the waves. Your rest periods are the retreat. And the rhythm between them is what creates sustainable, extraordinary performance over the course of months, years, and decades. Learn to conduct your orchestra. Map your rhythms. Protect your peak windows. Shift your states deliberately. And rest, truly rest, without guilt or apology. Because the person who masters this balance doesn't just perform better on any given day, they perform better over a lifetime. And that's the only timeline that truly matters. Chapter 13. The story you tell yourself is the life you live. There's a story you've been telling yourself for a very long time. It runs so deep, so constantly, so quietly beneath the surface of your daily awareness that you've probably never even noticed it's there. But it is there, and it is shaping everything. It's the story of who you are. Not the story you tell other people at dinner parties, not the polished, curated version of your life that you present to the world. I'm talking about the private story, the one that plays in the background when you're alone with your thoughts at 2 a.m, the one that narrates your life in a voice that sounds so much like truth that you've never thought to question it. Maybe your story sounds something like this. I'm someone who always gets close, but never quite makes it. Or maybe it's, good things happen to other people, not to me. Or perhaps it's quieter, more subtle. I'm just not the kind of person who gets to have that kind of life. These stories feel like facts. They feel as solid and unchangeable as the color of your eyes or the year you were born. But they're not facts. They never were. They're interpretations, meanings you assigned to experiences that happened to you, often when you were too young to know that other interpretations were possible. When you were 7 and your parents argued about money, you didn't just observe a disagreement. Your developing mind wrote a story. Money causes pain. Having money is dangerous. We are people who struggle. When you were 13 and your heart got broken for the first time, you didn't just experience a loss. Your subconscious authored a chapter. Love leads to pain. Vulnerability is unsafe. I'm not enough to make someone stay. When you were 22 and your first big career move didn't work out, you didn't just learn a lesson. Your inner narrator declared, "See, you're not cut out for this. Stay small. It's safer." Each of these moments planted a sentence in your story. And over years, those sentences became paragraphs. The paragraphs became chapters, and the chapters became the novel of your life. A novel you didn't consciously write, but have been faithfully living out ever since. Here's what I find both heartbreaking and deeply hopeful about this. The heartbreaking part is that most people never realize they're living inside a story they didn't choose. They mistake the narrative for reality. They spend their whole lives bumping up against invisible walls and never understanding that those walls are made of words. Words that can be rewritten. The hopeful part, the part I want you to hold on to with everything you have, is that you are the author. You always were. You just forgot. Rewriting your story doesn't mean pretending the painful chapters didn't happen. It doesn't mean pasting a happy ending over genuine suffering. It means going back to those pivotal moments and recognizing that the meaning you assigned to them was one interpretation among many, and not necessarily the most accurate one. The rejection that made you believe you weren't enough? What if it was actually preparation? What if the universe was steering you away from something that would have been wrong for you and toward something that will be exactly right? The failure that made you believe you weren't capable? What if it was education, the kind that can only come from falling down and discovering that you know how to get back up? The loss that made you believe love is dangerous? What if it was teaching you the depth of your own capacity to feel, which is actually your greatest gift? I'm not asking you to force these reinterpretations. I'm asking you to consider them, to hold them alongside your existing story and notice which one serves your growth and which one keeps you stuck. Because if you're going to live inside a story anyway, and you are, because that's how human minds work, doesn't it make sense to choose one that moves you forward rather than one that holds you in place? The practice of rewriting your story begins with what I call narrative archaeology, gently excavating the key moments that shaped your current self-concept. You don't need to analyze every experience you've ever had. You just need to identify the big ones, the handful of moments that left the deepest marks on your sense of who you are and what's possible for you. For each of those moments, ask yourself 3 questions. First, what happened? Just the facts, stripped of interpretation. Second, what story did I write about myself because of what happened? Third, what is another story, an equally true but more empowering story, that I could write about the same experience? This isn't about lying to yourself. It's about recognizing that truth is wider than any single interpretation. The same experience that proves you're not good enough also proves that you survived something difficult, which makes you resilient. The same failure that proves you're not capable also proves that you had the courage to try, which makes you braver than most. The same rejection that proves you're unlovable also proves that you have the capacity for deep connection, which makes you profoundly human. When you start living from your new story, making decisions as the person you're becoming rather than the person your old narrative said you were, reality begins to rearrange itself around you. Not magically, not overnight, but steadily, reliably, beautifully. Because when you change the story you tell yourself, you change the lens through which you see the world. And when you change the lens, you change what you notice, what you reach for, and what you believe you deserve. And that changes everything. Your life is not a fixed document. It's a living narrative that you are writing with every choice you make, every day you show up, every moment you decide to believe in the possibility of becoming someone new. Pick up the pen. The next chapter is yours. Chapter 14. Falling in Love with Getting Better. I want to introduce you to an idea that might quietly revolutionize the way you approach everything in your life. It's not flashy, it's not dramatic. It won't give you chills or make you want to run through a wall. But it might be the single most important shift in perspective you'll ever make. The idea is this: fall in love with the process of getting better. Not with being the best, not with achieving the goal, not with the applause, the recognition, the finish line. Fall in love with the practice itself, the daily, unglamorous, often invisible work of becoming slightly more capable than you were yesterday. Most people have been trained to worship outcomes. We celebrate the medal, not the 10,000 hours of training. We admire the bestseller, not the years of terrible first drafts. We envy the successful business, not the hundreds of failed experiments that love preceded it. And because we worship outcomes, we develop a deeply unhealthy relationship with the process that creates them. We see the process as something to endure, as the unpleasant price we have to pay for the result we actually want. We push through it, grit our teeth through it, white-knuckle our way through it, counting the days until we can finally arrive at the destination and stop suffering. But here's what the people who achieve the most extraordinary things in life understand that the rest of the world doesn't. The process is not the price. The process is the prize. The daily practice of improving, the struggle, the confusion, the small victories, the humbling failures. That's where life actually happens. That's where growth lives. That's where fulfillment hides. When you fall in love with the process, something magical happens to your relationship with failure. Failure stops being a verdict and becomes a teacher. It stops being something to avoid at all costs and becomes something to lean into with curiosity. That didn't work. Interesting. What can I learn? What will I try differently? This is the internal dialogue of mastery, and it's available to anyone who chooses to adopt it. Psychologist Carol Dweck identified two fundamental orientations toward ability and achievement. One she called the fixed mindset, the belief that your intelligence, talents, and capabilities are essentially set in stone. You either have it or you don't. The other she called the growth mindset, the belief that your abilities are like muscles. They develop and strengthen through effort, challenge, and practice. People with fixed mindsets avoid difficulty because struggle feels like evidence of limitation. People with growth mindsets seek out difficulty because struggle feels like the sensation of getting stronger. Same experience, effort, challenge, not yet knowing, but completely different interpretations and completely different life trajectories as a result. I want to invite you, gently, warmly, with complete confidence that you're capable of this, to become someone who is fascinated by their own development. Not obsessed with it in a neurotic, never good enough way. Fascinated by it in a curious, joyful, isn't it amazing that I can keep getting better at this way? Approach your weaknesses with curiosity instead of shame. When you discover something you're not good at, instead of feeling embarrassed, feel excited. You've just found an area with enormous room for growth. You've just discovered new territory to explore. The person who is honest about their weaknesses and curious about improving them will always, always outperform the person who hides from their weaknesses and only practices what they're already good at. Practice what researchers call deliberate practice, the kind of practice that focuses specifically on the things you can't do yet, that pushes you to the edge of your current ability, that feels uncomfortable and awkward and sometimes even embarrassing. This kind of practice isn't fun in the traditional sense, but it's deeply satisfying in a way that easy repetition never is, because you can feel yourself growing. You can feel the neural pathways forming. You can feel yourself becoming someone you weren't yesterday. And maintain what the Zen tradition calls beginner's mind, the willingness to approach even familiar things with fresh eyes and genuine curiosity. The moment you decide you've mastered something completely, you stop growing in that area. The moment you approach something with the humility of a beginner, new dimensions of depth and possibility reveal themselves. The mastery mindset isn't just about skill development. It's a philosophy of life. It says, I am not a finished product. I am a work in progress. And I find that beautiful rather than frustrating. It says, every day is an opportunity to learn something, to improve something, to discover something about myself that I didn't know yesterday. It says, the journey of becoming is not a burden to bear, it's a gift to unwrap, one day at a time, for the rest of my life. Chapter 15. The person you were always meant to become. We've traveled a long way together through these pages. We've explored the invisible garden of your subconscious mind. We've named the quiet war of self-sabotage. We've understood how your brain paints the world you see. We've discovered that confidence is a skill, not a birthright. We've learned to recalibrate the compass of identity. We've practiced crossing the 5-second bridge between hesitation and courage. We've learned the languages of the subconscious: repetition, emotion, imagery. We've befriended the monster of fear. We've built the root system of resilience. We've reclaimed the quiet superpower of focus. We've started rolling the snowball of momentum. We've learned to conduct our inner orchestra. We've begun rewriting the story of who we are. And we've fallen in love with the beautiful, messy, sacred process of getting better. And now, at the end of all that, there's really only one question left. And it's the question that everything else has been leading to. Who are you becoming? Not who are you, not who were you. Who are you becoming? Because your life, from this moment forward, will be shaped not by what happened to you in the past, not by what's happening around you in the present, but by the answer to that question. The person you are becoming is the most powerful force in your entire existence. More powerful than your circumstances, more powerful than your history, more powerful than any obstacle, any setback, any limitation that life could possibly throw in your path. Most people never consciously answer this question. They drift. They react. They let their past write their future. They let other people's expectations become their own. They let the story they inherited define the life they build. And they arrive at the end of their years wondering why it all felt so small, so constrained, so far from the life they sensed, somewhere deep down, in moments of rare honesty, they were actually capable of living. I don't want that for you. I want something different for you. I want you to be the person who chose, who looked at the raw materials of their life, the pain and the beauty, the failures and the victories, the doubt and the courage, and deliberately shaped them into something extraordinary. Not extraordinary by the world's definition, extraordinary by yours. The identity I want you to build, the one I've been gently guiding you toward through every chapter and every word, is what I call the unstoppable identity. And I want to be very clear about what that means, because the word unstoppable can sound aggressive or arrogant, and that's not what I'm pointing to at all. Being unstoppable doesn't mean you never fall down. It means you always get back up. It doesn't mean you never feel afraid. It means fear never gets the final word. It doesn't mean you never doubt yourself. It means doubt is a visitor in your house, not the owner. It doesn't mean you never struggle. It means struggle is something you move through, not something you're defined by. Being unstoppable is quiet. It's steady. It's the person who shows up on the days when showing up feels impossible. It's the person who keeps going when every reasonable excuse for stopping is sitting right there on the table. It's the person who, after being knocked flat by life, takes a breath, wipes the dust off, and says, not with bravado, but with a calm, earned certainty, I'm not done yet. This identity is built on 4 pillars, and by now you know each of them intimately. The first pillar is the deep belief that you can learn and develop anything you need. Not that you already know everything. Not that you're naturally gifted at everything. But that you are fundamentally capable of growth. When you carry this belief, skill gaps stop being barriers and start being temporary conditions. You stop saying, I can't, and start saying, I can't yet. And that one word, yet, changes everything. The second pillar is the understanding that failure is feedback, not fate. Every mistake teaches you something. Every setback contains a seed of wisdom. Every closed door reveals the location of an open one. When failure stops being the end of the story and becomes part of the story, a necessary chapter in the longer arc of your becoming, you become someone who is willing to try things that terrify other people. And willingness to try is the single greatest predictor of extraordinary results. The third pillar is the commitment to consistency over intensity. You don't need to be brilliant every day. You don't need to perform at your peak every moment. You just need to show up, again and again and again. The snowball doesn't care if you're having a good day or a bad day. It only cares that you keep rolling it forward. Small actions performed daily compound into results that look like miracles to people who don't understand the math. The fourth pillar is radical ownership of your responses. You cannot control what happens to you. You cannot control what other people do or say or think. You cannot control the economy, the weather, or the 1,000 random variables that shape your daily experience. But you can control how you respond. You can control the meaning you assign to events. You can control the actions you take in the face of difficulty. And when you fully own that power, when you stop giving it away to circumstances and start wielding it with intention, you become someone that life cannot break. Bend, yes. Break, never. These 4 pillars, practiced daily, vote by vote, choice by choice, create an identity that doesn't depend on external validation to sustain itself. You don't need the world to approve of you. You don't need conditions to be perfect. You don't need a guarantee that things will work out. You just need the quiet, unshakable knowledge that no matter what happens, you will keep going. You will keep growing. You will keep becoming. And here's the thing I most want you to know as we reach the end of our time together. The person I've been describing, the person who gets back up, who moves through fear, who shows up daily, who owns their responses, who falls in love with growth. That person is not some idealized version of humanity that only exists in books and motivational speeches. That person is you. Not a future you that you have to earn the right to become. Not a better version of you that's conditional on perfect circumstances. You, right now, with all your imperfections and fears and unfinished chapters. Everything we've discussed, every technique, every insight, every principle, these are just tools. And tools are only useful if you pick them up and use them. The most sophisticated gardening equipment in the world won't grow a single flower if it stays in the shed. So here is my final invitation to you. Not a command, not a demand, an invitation, offered with genuine care for the person you are and the person you're becoming. Start today. Not tomorrow, not Monday, not when you feel ready. Today. Pick one thing from everything we've discussed. Just one. Maybe it's the 5-second bridge. Maybe it's casting one small identity vote. Maybe it's 5 minutes of focused presence. Maybe it's rewriting one sentence of your old story. Maybe it's simply acknowledging for the first time that you have the power to change. Start there. Start small. Start imperfectly. Start scared. Just start. Because information without implementation is just entertainment. Knowledge without action is just decoration. And understanding without application is just a more sophisticated form of staying stuck. You were not built for stuck. You were built for becoming. And the becoming begins the moment you decide, not with a grand dramatic gesture, but with one quiet, brave, imperfect step. That who you've been is not who you have to remain. Your life is not a finished painting. It's a canvas that you get to work on every single day. And the brush is in your hand right now. Pick it up. The masterpiece is waiting.